You were taught that intelligence is power. You were told to read more, think more, consume more, and one day you would arrive somewhere worth being. That is the lie they fed you. Not a careless lie, a deliberate one. Because a population that confuses information with understanding is a population that stays manageable. Machiavelli understood something the modern world has spent 5 centuries trying to bury. Intelligence without control is not a weapon. It is a wound. It turns inward. It devours the man who carries it. And the sharpest minds in history, the ones who ended up alone in rooms they built themselves, respected by everyone, trusted by no one, they all made the same mistake. They never stopped to ask not how to think better, but what kind of person that thinking was turning them into. This video is about both. The 5 patterns that separate sovereign minds from average ones, and the 4 cracks that will appear in you if you are not watching. Because both are coming.
The only question is whether you see them first. If you are looking for motivation, close this now. Go back to the crowd. But if you want the truth, even the part of the truth that will make you uncomfortable, stay. Because what I am about to show you has broken lesser men who thought they were stronger than the material. There are 5 patterns that will change how you think, and the 5th one will explain everything about why brilliant people end up alone. Phase 1. The inversion mind. Most men chase success. They set goals, visualize outcomes, map the path forward, and they fail. Not from lack of effort, from lack of vision in the other direction. The average man asks, "How do I win?" The sovereign mind asks, "What destroys men at exactly this stage? And how do I eliminate it before it reaches me?" This is inversion thinking, and almost nobody uses it deliberately because it feels like pessimism. It is not pessimism. It is precision.
There is a difference between a man who fears failure and a man who studies it, the way a general studies an enemy's formations before the first shot is fired. Charlie Munger built one of the greatest investing minds of the 20th century around this single shift. His operating principle was simple and ruthless. Tell me where I am going to die, so I never go there. Not how do I build wealth? What kills wealth at every stage? Overconfidence, illiquidity, narrative seduction? And how do I remove those threats before they reach me? Apply it now. You are not asking how to build a lasting relationship. You are asking what kills relationships. Contempt, dishonesty, the slow erosion of being taken for granted. And you are removing those things surgically before they take root. You are not asking how to build a business. You are asking what kills businesses at your current stage. Poor cash flow, wrong hires, founder ego that can't receive real feedback. And you are eliminating each one. Caesar understood this at Alesia. Vastly outnumbered, trapped between Vercingetorix's forces inside the fortress and a massive relief army approaching from outside, he did not ask how to win. He asked what would destroy him, attack from 2 directions simultaneously, and he solved that problem first. He built fortifications facing inward and outward at the same time. He removed the threat before it materialized. Then he won. This is the inversion mind. Winners do not just chase outcomes, they remove what destroys outcomes. That is the first shift. And if you think that is the hardest one, wait. Because the next one demands something more uncomfortable than strategy. It demands honesty about your own mind. Phase 2. Metacognition. Learning how to learn.
Two men read the same book. One walks away with facts, the other walks away with a different way of seeing. Same book, same words, completely different outputs. The difference is not intelligence.
It is that the second man has studied himself as a learner. He knows when he retains information, how he actually absorbs it, what the gap is between understanding something in the moment and being able to apply it under pressure 3 weeks later. This is metacognition, thinking about thinking, and almost nobody practices it deliberately. The average man consumes more content, more books, more videos. He mistakes volume for depth and wonders why nothing changes. He has filled his head and emptied his life. Cognitive psychologist Robert Bjork at UCLA spent decades studying what he called desirable difficulties, the conditions under which learning actually sticks versus the conditions that merely feel productive. His finding was brutal in its simplicity. The learning methods that feel easiest produce the least durable retention. The methods that feel uncomfortable, spaced repetition, retrieval practice, interleaving, produce knowledge that holds under pressure. Most people never discover this because they never ask the question. They study how to absorb information the way most men handle their finances, by instinct and habit, and hoping it works out. Stop. Audit yourself. When do you actually retain things? Morning or late evening? Do you lock in information by reading, by explaining it aloud, by applying it immediately? What is the gap between what you understood in the moment and what you could actually execute on under stress? Napoleon was famous for his ability to hold enormous amounts of strategic information in his mind simultaneously, not because of raw intelligence, but because he understood precisely how he processed information, and he built his working habits around that knowledge. He read fast, retained through application, and kept his staff structured so that information reached him in the form he could use it in. Once you understand how your brain actually learns, you stop competing on volume. You compete on depth. That is a different game entirely. And the next phase is where it gets dangerous. Because the next shift requires you to turn the blade on yourself. Phase 3. Socratic self-examination. Destroying your own beliefs. Think of something you believe strongly right now. Anything. Now ask yourself this. What is the strongest possible argument against that belief? Not the weakest version, not the straw man your ego finds comfortable to defeat. The best, most logically rigorous, most uncomfortable case for why you are wrong. Can you make it? If you cannot, that is not a sign of conviction. It is a sign that you have been defending a position you have never actually stress-tested. A belief that has never been attacked from the inside is not a belief. It is a reflex. Socratic thinking, the deliberate practice of attacking your own conclusions before anyone else does, is one of the rarest cognitive skills a person can develop. It is uncomfortable. Things you believed were solid begin to wobble. Your sense of certainty, which felt like strength, reveals itself as familiarity. They are not the same. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Most people's beliefs are built on appearance, on what sounds correct, on what the crowd around them agrees with, on what makes them feel coherent. Real thinking goes underneath that. It asks what is actually true. even when the answer strips something away from you. Galileo practiced exactly this. In a world where the Church had built an entire cosmological framework that was also, functionally, a political framework, he did not simply accept the inherited model. He attacked it. He built the observational case against it. He paid for that willingness with his freedom. But he was right. And being right, actually right, not just confidently wrong, is what remains. The practical instruction is this. Take one belief you hold about yourself or how the world works. Spend 15 minutes constructing the best argument against it you can. Not to abandon the belief, to understand it. A belief you can defend against its strongest opposition is a conviction. Everything else is habit. Weak minds defend opinions. Strong minds attack their own thinking. That is not humility. That is precision. But here is where the trap begins to form. Because a mind that gets good at dismantling beliefs, including other people's beliefs, begins to look at people differently. And that change is quiet. It does not announce itself. Phase 4. Negative visualization. Facing the worst first. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. Before any major decision or undertaking, they would sit deliberately with the worst realistic outcome, not to catastrophize, not to spiral, but to prepare. What is the actual worst case? What do I lose? How does it feel? What do I do when that happens? Marcus Aurelius did this every morning before facing the court of an empire. He wrote in his private journals, never intended for anyone else's eyes, about what it would mean to lose power, to be betrayed, to die before his work was complete. Not as despair, as preparation. A man who has already survived something mentally does not freeze when it appears in reality. He moves, because he has rehearsed this. Dr. Julie Norham at Wellesley College studied this pattern under the term defensive pessimism, the counterintuitive finding that certain high-performing individuals systematically imagine worst-case scenarios before important events, and that this practice measurably increases their performance under pressure. The mechanism is clear. By removing the element of surprise, it converts anxiety from a disruption into preparation. Most men run the opposite program. They rehearse success in their minds, the win, the recognition, the way things look when everything works, and when reality arrives, which is always messier than the fantasy, they collapse. Not because they are weak, because they were completely unprepared. Prepare for failure. Then build toward the best possible outcome. That sequence, in that order, is what keeps you functional when the pressure is real. The practical instruction? Before your next significant decision, sit with the worst realistic outcome for 10 minutes. Name it specifically. Feel the weight of it. Then ask what you would do. Then proceed. And yet, none of this changes what is building beneath the surface, because the fifth shift is the one that closes the trap. Phase 5. Identity over discipline. Discipline breaks. Under enough pressure, enough failed days, enough sustained stress, willpower runs out. You already know this. You have felt it. Identity does not break the same way. A man who forces himself to train through pure willpower fights the resistance every day. Some days he wins, some days he does not. The man who simply is an athlete does not fight the same battle. Not training would feel like a violation of who he is at a fundamental level. Same behavior, completely different engine. And they are not equally reliable. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles." The title does not make you the person. You become the person through the accumulation of actions that cast votes for a specific identity, and then the title follows. Identity before achievement. Become it first. The results are a consequence. Robert Greene, in The 48 Laws of Power, observes this pattern in the rise of Cosimo de' Medici. Cosimo did not announce himself as the most powerful man in Florence. He operated from the premise of that identity, patient, strategic, never exposed, and the power accumulated around that identity as a natural consequence. He did not force the actions. The identity produced them. The practical instruction? Identify the specific person you are building toward, not the achievements, the person. Then ask what that person does today, in ordinary moments when no one is watching. Do that, not because it builds toward the identity, because it is the identity. You are still here. Good. The fragile one's already left. What comes next is what the self-improvement space does not want to discuss, because it is not about optimization. It is about what optimization costs when it goes unchecked. Comment below. I build in silence. The cracks. What happens when the blade turns? Everything you have learned in the previous 5 phases is real, and if you apply it without watching what it does to you, it will quietly turn you into something you will not recognize.
This is not speculation. This is the pattern. Every man who developed genuine strategic capacity and lost his humanity did not choose to become cold. He arrived there through a series of small, reasonable-seeming steps that he never stopped to examine. The first crack: impatience that grows. You start seeing things in conversations that others cannot. The logical gaps, the conclusions reached without any actual thinking. You try to engage at first, then you stop. Not from anger, from dismissal. You tell yourself this is efficiency. It is not. It is the first fracture in your connection to the world. Real influence requires patience, the ability to bring people toward understanding, not simply to move past them. A general who walks too far ahead of his army is not leading. He is walking alone. And an army without a general loses. And a general without an army is just a man in an empty field. The second crack: forgetting what confusion felt like. When you genuinely develop these skills, you forget the confusion that preceded them. And once you forget it, you begin to feel something colder than impatience when others make the mistakes you used to make. That coldness is contempt. And contempt destroys empathy. Without empathy, you can observe people, but you cannot understand them. A mind that cannot truly understand people will keep producing critical blind spots in every major decision it makes. You did not get smarter. You got disconnected. Those are not the same. The third crack: isolation. Nobody announces this one. You start thinking differently, which means you start relating differently. Conversations that used to engage you feel shallow. Small talk feels like static. You pull back, not dramatically, but quietly. You frame it as standards, as focus, as not wasting time. But there is a version of that story where it is not discipline. It is loneliness that learned how to justify itself. And the two look identical from the inside. Lincoln kept advisors in the room who disagreed with him constantly.
He wanted them there. He understood that the man who eliminates opposition from his environment does not protect himself, he blinds himself. The Spartan agoge produced warriors precisely because it built men through sustained contact with resistance, not isolation from it. Resistance is what keeps the blade sharp. The fourth crack, and the most dangerous, the feedback illusion. When you develop a track record of being right, people stop correcting you. Not because you are infallible, because you intimidate them. Because the last few times they pushed back, you had a response for everything. Eventually, they stopped trying. The silence that follows is not respect. It is avoidance. And it is the most dangerous environment a sharp mind can occupy. Because a mind operating without real resistance does not stay sharp.
It drifts, confident and unaware, toward the exact errors that honest feedback would have caught. This is how the monster is made. Not through one dramatic decision, through slow distance, through impatience that becomes dismissal, through empathy that erodes, through isolation that deepens, through feedback that disappears, and a mind that gets more precise in theory while becoming more wrong in practice. Let me be direct about what this path actually costs. The man who walks this road without the controls, without feedback, without code, without genuine connection, ends up technically formidable and functionally alone. His intelligence builds a room, and the room is impeccably designed, and there is no one in it. Machiavelli himself wrote The Prince while stripped of everything, tortured, exiled, a man who had advised princes, who had built diplomatic relationships across Italian city-states, who understood power as few men of his era did, sitting in a farmhouse outside Florence with nothing left but his mind. He did not write The Prince as a celebration. He wrote it as a man who had seen what power without wisdom costs. He wrote it as a warning wrapped in a manual. The wolf does not choose the cold because the cold is pleasant. He chooses it because the alternative, the warmth of the herd, the comfort of the crowd, costs him what he is. But there is a version of that story that gets told wrong. The wolf that becomes so accustomed to isolation that he forgets how to operate in the world is not powerful. He is just cold and alone. The freedom of real strategic thinking is cold. It demands things from you that most people are unwilling to pay. But the coldness is a condition of the power, not a substitute for it. A man who is cold and connected is a sovereign. A man who is cold and isolated is just a man standing in the dark, telling himself he chose the dark. Machiavelli understood this. He lost everything. He still changed the world. Not because he was isolated, because even in exile, even stripped of title and position, he remained connected to history, to ideas, to the human patterns he had spent his life studying. This freedom is cold, but it is the only freedom that is truly yours. The question is whether you are strong enough to carry it without letting it carry you. You made it to the end. That already tells me something about you. Most people left before the second phase. You stayed through the warning. That is not a small thing. What separates every outcome discussed here, the sovereign and the monster, the man who builds and the man who ends up alone, is not capacity, it is control. The same understanding that lets you lead people honestly is the same understanding that lets you manipulate them. The blade does not make the choice. You do. Every day.
in the small moments that accumulate into who you are. Take the inversion mind. Remove what destroys before it reaches you. Take metacognition. Study yourself as a learner and stop competing on volume. Take Socratic examination. Attack your own beliefs before the world does. Take negative visualization. Survive the worst mentally so it cannot break you in reality. Take identity building. Become the person first and let the results follow. And hold the line on the 4 cracks. Hunt for feedback that makes you uncomfortable. Stay anchored in the real world, not just your models of it. Build your code before power tests it. See people clearly and choose to lead them rather than use them. That is the whole architecture. Simple to understand, genuinely difficult to execute. Because it requires working against the ego that sharp thinking naturally constructs. Subscribe, not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you are done being a man who consumes ideas and lets them pass through him unchanged. Subscribe because you are building something in yourself, in your work, in how you move through the world, and you want to keep going deeper. The question this video started with was simple. After this, are you becoming a genius or something more dangerous? The answer is yours to make. Make it carefully.